I never really felt like asking, why me? From the beginning, I just felt like asking, why not me? You know, what would make me so special that our lives wouldn't be touched by some kind of a disease like this? I felt like God was in control and that this would be a great way for me to be able to witness to people. And in fact, before that time, you know, a couple of the kids were in school and Dash was in kindergarten and Reagan was little. I really found myself asking God, what am I going to do with my life now? You know, what can I be doing for you? So I thought, boy, that's a way to answer a prayer there. But we really felt humbled that God felt that we were worthy to be challenged in such a way. The next day, I didn't feel that confident. I went ahead and took Kelsey and Dane to school like I usually do, and I stopped by my mom's house to drop Dash and Reagan off there. And that was a really hard thing for me to have to do, was tell my mom that it was cancer. That was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And once the tears started that day, it was really hard to shut them off. That day and the next day were very long days for me. I met 3 new doctors in Indianapolis and had things done to me that at 35 I never thought I'd have to approach: a bone scan, a CAT scan, x-rays, blood work, all of that stuff. But thankfully the test showed that nothing else looked abnormal at that time. But I still felt very alone and frightened. And before the results came back, I just had this fear that, you know, that the cancer was everywhere. But like I said, thankfully, it didn't appear that way at the time. So that evening after I got home, I was ready to take a much-needed, relaxing bath. And all of a sudden, I just really have a hard time explaining this. It was almost like a physical touch. I just felt the Lord's peace come over me. It started at the top of my head and just went clear down, just slowly through my body. And it was just really a wonderful experience. And I knew then that wherever this journey was going to take me, that God was in control and that He was going to be there to walk me through it and to work through it. Well, 1 week after I was diagnosed, we began chemotherapy. And my mom and my sister Rita took me to Indianapolis, but something else went with me that day too. Dane's second grade teacher was really good at writing me, sending me cards and putting in encouraging Bible verses. And one was from Isaiah 41:13. And it said, "For I am the Lord your God. For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you." And then she just put a little side note in there, and she said, imagine that literally. And so I did, and I really did. I felt the Lord taking hold of my hand and walking me through that day. And I know that many of your prayers went with me that day too. Well, the nurses down at the breast center in Indianapolis told me that they had a TV with a VCR and that we could watch some movies during chemotherapy. So we took something that we thought would be lighthearted and entertaining and would be distracting from the real reason that we were there. But I did know that there were other reasons for that VCR. Before they even put the IV in me to get the chemotherapy started, they showed me a video on how to give myself injections. So I wasn't real thrilled about that. I tried to pay real close attention to it, but in the back of my mind I'm thinking, I have a sister-in-law and a real good friend, and I know other people that can give shots, and I'm just going to have them come and do that for me. But, you know, I got to realize that I needed to take responsibility, and because you're supposed to give it to yourself about the same time every day. And so I just sucked it up and learned how to do it. 10 days after each of my treatments, I had alternated between my legs and my stomach and gave myself those shots. The treatments usually knocked me out for a few days, but by the end of the week, I was feeling better. And a good friend of mine made sure that I had meals brought in to us a few days after each one of those treatments, and that too was a very big help. They told me about 14 days after my first treatment that I would probably lose my hair. And they said it's easier if you have longer hair, which I did at the time. If you get it cut short, that would be easier to lose it. And so I took their advice and had my hair cut. Well, this always amazes me, the Lord's timing. He always knows just how much you can take and then when to send help. On Thursday morning, April 24th, 16 days after the treatment, and I always like to put this in that I only made it those 2 extra days because I used a lot of hairspray and I would not touch my hair at all. And so I kept it as long as I could. The hair came out. And to prepare myself for this horrible experience, I just kept telling myself, it's only hair. You know, hair is not me. It's not the person that I am. and it's temporary. I just, really kept trying to be positive and pump myself up about that. But, when it came down to it, and you saw your hair coming out in clumps, it was very hard. And I needed help that day. My mom had already called and said that she was going to be out doing some errands, and so she would pick Dash up for me and take him to kindergarten. But before she got there, I went ahead and made other arrangements for a friend of ours that was in our area to take him to school for me. And so we had lunch, and we got the baby down for her nap, and the Lord just gave me the strength to get through that morning. I had already started pulling it out a little bit that morning, and I realized what I was doing, and I didn't want to scare Dash, and I just put a ball cap on and waited until after he got to school. But after I laid Reagan down and came downstairs, and that's when I was able just to let go and let all of those emotions out, and it was very comforting to have my mom there and to be able to rush into her arms and be strengthened by that. I just had this sickening feeling in my stomach that this was just another thing that I was going to have to face, and I really didn't want to face that. Well, after my hair came out, it took me a few minutes to get up the nerve to look at myself in the mirror. Like I said, I had already started pulling it out a little bit before, and so I got a glimpse of myself in a window one time. And so I had a little bit of hair and a little bit of not hair, and it just about made me sick. But it came out, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought, you just look like an old, shriveled up person, and that was pretty hard to take at 35. But thankfully, I had a wig close by, and it was close to my natural color, and after we trimmed it up a little bit, it really made me feel a lot more confident. This time I really started, after I lost my hair, I started looking forward to the second treatment. I know that sounds funny to look forward to a chemotherapy treatment, but I wanted to go back down there and talk to the doctor because I knew he would measure the tumor, and I could just tell that it had already shrunk. And it had started out at 10 by 7 centimeters, which is quite large for a tumor. But after the very first treatment, it was down to 4 by 4, and that's a 77% reduction. And the doctor said that that's a good response, and when you have that good of a response up front, then that increases your chances of beating something like this. So we were all excited, and thank God for that great news. And Dane's class even, they cheered when their teacher showed him, she drew a picture of a pie up there and showed him just how big that was because they had been praying for me. So they were really excited to see God answering prayer in that way. Well, the tumor continued to shrink, and after the fourth treatment had time to work, it was even less than 1 by 1 square centimeters. It was really hard to even feel. And so the doctors were real excited and pleased about that, but I still needed to go through surgery. So on July 9th, I entered Columbia Women's Hospital in Indianapolis, and I had a mastectomy and a reconstructive surgery. And I wasn't really too nervous about that because I was kind of looking forward to the new, smaller me and becoming a new woman. So I was kind of excited about that on one hand. I got a chance to talk to the surgeon before the surgery, and that helped a lot. And I just told him, I have a lot of prayer support. You just wouldn't believe this. And I said, you're not going into that surgery room alone, and that the Lord's going to be with you, and this is going to be a successful surgery. Well, after I got home from the surgery, by the way, went well, and he said that, as well as it could have gone, but that really didn't have a lot to do with the cancer part. But at this time, I like to always tell a little funny story. After I got home from the hospital, a good friend of mine thought she'd bring me a nice Christian novel to read, and that would help take my mind off of things and just pass the time a little bit while I was trying to rest and recuperate. Well, the 4 kids were gone. My brother had taken them up to Fort Wayne for a few days. So I was home by myself, and I was resting. I thought, well, I'll start this book. And I had a really hard time putting down the book because it was really good. But then I got into the middle of it. And, well, the mother of the main character, you guessed it, she died of breast cancer. So I couldn't wait to call my friend, and she had told me before that she hadn't gotten very far in the book, so she couldn't tell whether it was good or not. So I called her and I said, obviously you didn't make it as far as I did in this book. But I like to share the story to tease my friend, but I'm also very quick to add that that's probably just what I needed at that time. Because when I got to that part, all the fears and emotions that I had held back and I tried not to show. They came pouring out with tears and tears and tears, and I cried for a long time. And again, I was glad I was home alone, and I talked right out loud to God, and I just kept telling him of those fears and that I need you to get me through this. And after that time, I felt a lot better. So I tease her about it, but I always thank her for loaning me that book. About a week after surgery, we got the pathology report back, and it showed that there was still some cancer left in the breast and that the lymph nodes had been involved. So because of that, they suggested I have more chemotherapy treatment. But this time it wasn't as hard, and I didn't make my hair fall out, so I was glad about that. And I was able to finish those in October, but then I moved right into radiation right after that. And they told me I was going to have 30 treatments, which is about 6 weeks. And so I hurried up and did some quick calculations, and I realized that I could be done before Christmas. And that's all I needed to hear. That was my goal. I knew that I'd been through 2 rounds of chemo, I'd been through the surgery, and if I could just stick it out till Christmas, then we would have another reason to rejoice that great holiday. So I was looking forward. I was able to get that done and put it behind me, and I was looking forward to the new year, thinking that 1997 was horrible, but we grew through it, and we did everything we needed to do, and now I could put that behind me and look forward to a normal 1998. But little did I know what was right around the corner. The kids went back to school in January, and I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and start my routine of exercising again, try to get rid of some of this stuff. And so I started doing that, and a few days later, I noticed this lower back pain. So I thought I had just pulled a muscle. So I quit exercising, but the pain didn't go away. Dina and I had already planned this little victory celebration trip just for a few days to Florida with our good friends Mike and Janet. And we just had a really great time, and I thought, well, while I'm down there, I'll be able to rest, and I won't be lifting the baby, so maybe that will help my back, and we'll see what happens. Well, that pain didn't go away either, so as soon as we got home, I called Dr. Marvel. He's the doctor that's over Marion's radiation department. And I went in to see him, and I explained my pain to him, and he said he didn't think that it was related to the cancer, but they would do some tests, and unfortunately, it was more cancer. Had a bone scan and a CAT scan, and it revealed a tumor on vertebrae and places on my ribs and a couple of places on my lung. That news just wasn't really all that easy to take, because I thought that we had just put the hardest year of our lives behind us, and now I felt like we were facing an even bigger problem. After we received that news, I was alone in the car for a few minutes, and I just felt like the Lord was saying to me, you need a lot of people to be praying for you tonight, and you need to follow the scriptures and be anointed with oil. We had called here, but we knew that Joe and Mary were on their way out of town, so we had called our former minister and elders and asked them to come over to do that. And I'd called my sister in Fort Wayne, and she told one of my brothers that live in Fort Wayne, and they, along with his daughter, came down to our house that evening. And a good friend of ours, Don Day, came over, and he brought supper to us. And that was the last thing on my mind that day, and I just, I know the Lord prompted him to do that, and it was really touching that he did that. A few other close friends and family came over that night, and it was a very emotional evening, but it really was also very wonderful. We had time of singing and sharing and praying, and you definitely could feel the Lord's presence in our living room that evening. I could feel prayers from other homes too, because, like I said, I felt like the Lord had said, you need a lot of people to be praying. So when we got home, we made a lot of phone calls and said, could you please pray at this time so that all of our prayers could be going up at the same time? Also, at this time, my mom was in Florida visiting some friends, and I knew that she was going to be calling me that evening, and I didn't want the phone ringing and distracting us during the middle of all this, so I took the phone off the hook. Well, one of our friends that was over there that evening saw it off the hook and didn't realize that I had done that intentionally, so she, thinking that she was helping me out, put it back on the hook. Well, 2 or 3 minutes later, the phone rang, and of course it was my mom. We hadn't actually started anything yet, so that really was a good time to call. And even though I had the bad news to share with her, I was also anxious to tell her what we were doing that evening, and she really thanked me later and was thankful to God that he had allowed her to call me before, because then she was able to pray with her friend at the same time that all these people were up here were praying, and so she was able to be a part of that. This newfound cancer led me back to my oncologist in Indianapolis, And Dean went with me that day, and we had a very quiet ride as we were both dealing with our thoughts and emotions. But after we saw Dr. Sledge, we both felt a little bit better. He had started me on a drug called tamoxifen. It's an oral hormonal treatment. And he said that sometimes when you start that, then it can cause, if there is any cancer left in your body, it can cause that to flare up. And actually, that's usually a good sign because it shows that it's working. But blood work showed that in my case it wasn't. The cancer count just kept going up. So they took me off of that. At this time, I was also given another book that was called A Cancer Battle Plan. And it's about a woman who had breast cancer, and she'd gone through all the traditional treatments too, and they had failed, and basically they had sent her home to die. But she had turned to nutrition, and this could take a whole nother speech, but it's something that I think I need to mention that everyone should be aware of. That we do so much harm to our bodies by what we put into it, but yet we can also do a lot of good to it by what we eat and what we put into it. And I've changed my eating habits quite a bit, and I would encourage all of you to take a good look at nutrition as well. Well, the next couple of months I tried to do that, tried to eat right and tried to make sure I rest and just rebuild my body. But I still had the pain. So one morning in May I got up and I knew that something was different. I could hardly get out of bed, but I got the kids up and got them ready for school. And fortunately my mom and another friend were with me that morning, because by noon it was very obvious that I needed help. So I got in to see Dr. Marvel again, and he got me in right away. And after answering a few questions, and they gave me a shot to help with the pain, they took me down for an MRI. And it showed that I had 2 collapsed vertebrae, and one of them was jagged and was causing a spinal cord compression. Well, Dr. Marvel didn't waste any time, and they took me right back to the radiation department. And it was really after hours, but they all stayed over, and they prepared me, and then they went ahead and gave me my first radiation treatment that evening. So I was admitted to the hospital, and they put me on bed rest. And I thought I was just going to be there just that one night. That one night turned into 5 nights. Dr. Bob Jackson was called in because of the bone involvement, and he ordered a back brace for me, which I continue to wear sometimes. And he wouldn't let me get out of that bed at all until the back brace arrived. But unfortunately for Bob, I knew his home phone number. So on the morning that the brace was to arrive, I just couldn't take it any longer. My hair was greasy and my skin felt really yucky. And so I called him kind of early and talked to his wife, Brenda, and I just said, could you please beg him for me? Let me get up and take a shower. So he himself was in the shower, and she said, well, maybe he'll be a little more compassionate about that then. So I don't know if it was the timing of the call or what, but I think he reluctantly agreed to let me have the shower. When I got home from the hospital, things were already in place for me to be taken care of. My good friend Wendy Room had made arrangements for someone to stay with me during the day and for dinners to be brought in. And then since then, you guys have taken over and helped out with that. And either my mom or Dean's mom has stayed with us almost every night since then to help out. A lot of times Dean would have to get up during the middle of the night to go to work, and so I would need that help, and they have sacrificed a lot, and we could never thank them enough for that. And so from that time until now, I've continually been surrounded and cared for by my dear friends and family. Just to finish bringing you up to date a little bit on the physical part of this, I've had follow-up bone scans, and there's some more hot spots in the ribs and pelvic area and along the vertebrae. And in July, I had to have more radiation, 10 more treatments, a little higher on the vertebrae. And they also found out that I was low on oxygen and blood, so my oxygen's up a little bit, but I still have to use it occasionally. And I had to spend another night in hospital and get 3 units of blood put into me. I go once a month to the hospital and get a bone strengthening drug through an IV, and soon I'm going to be starting a different hormonal treatment. Results from blood work that I had last week weren't all that encouraging. The liver counts were up and my blood counts were down again, so just Friday I had to have 2 more units of blood put into me. I feel a little bit better though after having that. I have more bone scans and more CAT scans that are scheduled within the next couple of weeks.